Hello. Hi. How you doing? Welcome in. We're doing some book reading today, of course. Um I changed my backlight a bit because I kind of want it to look like the light from the roof is shining down into the uh dark room cuz we got the aurora going on. I thought it looked pretty good. I might edit it still. It's a little too bright, but also you kind of need it to be bright so it's visible, so I might leave it. I don't know. Doing okay. It's been kind of a lazy day. How was Tart? Tart did not have a lazy day, but I'm happy with that. I got stuff done. Um, I went out shopping because we need some ingredients for cooking. Plus, um, we got one of those, like, slush snowplow blocking things for the mailbox so the mailbox doesn't get run over again. So we needed to get a post that would fit into that to hold it up. So we went and we went to like a home supply store. So that's where I got some seeds. Um and some strawberry root ball cluster things. I don't know how well they'll grow. The internet has varying levels of like this is good slash this is bad, but we'll see. It should start properly warming up soon, so I should be able to start the plants in the Florida room. Yay! Other than that, I cooked. I made salmon with carrots and teriyaki, and I also made my mom some Korean ground beef. It's literally like ground beef, Korean sauces stuff, and you put it on like rice or something. She wanted it for like lunch, like she can just reheat it good, and like it didn't take long, and I am now the new designated cook, so I'll be learning things and stuff and things. Next thing I'm gonna cook is carbonara, and then after that I'm gonna make some homemade meatballs because we have fresh parmesan for the carbonara, and we need something to use the parmesan for. So I'm gonna put it in some meatballs. Useful skill to learn? It is, yes. And I do enjoy it. And I like when people say that they like something that I made. So that's exciting, you know. Um don't know what I'm gonna make on Saturday because the deal is I make something Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. Clearly. Because it's Saturday today. because Monday I don't stream, Wednesday I don't stream, and Saturday I don't stream until 8, which I should be done cooking by 8 anyway if anybody wants dinner, you know? So, keep you busy too? True. So today was pretty busy. And it'll still leave me with enough time to work on art. It'll just, keep me busy. My mom has a spare um a spare like planner, and she didn't like the way that it was formatted, so she gave it to me. So I'm gonna use it for my cooking planner, so I know like when I'm supposed to like get things out to thaw them, because you don't want to get things out too early, because then they can, I don't know, go weird. It's good for your self-esteem too. You feel more satisfied with your days when you accomplish more. Very true. You, I know you mean that generally, like just as people usually feel more accomplished with their days when they accomplish more, but I feel like you have also known me long enough to know that like I genuinely do feel like I've done more with my days and I'm less of a useless person when I get stuff done. Also, I forgot to say congrats on first, of course. What about Tom? I didn't bother to grow zucchini this year because um I think we're trying to keep the garden pretty small. I mean, we got two different seed varieties of cucumbers though. We got some bigger cucumbers and some smaller cucumbers. Because bigger cucumbers are better for pickling. Eh. Smaller cucumbers are generally sweeter because they don't grow as big and they use the sugar in them to grow in size. So if they're smaller, they usually tend to taste better. Um, the smaller seeds we got, the smaller variety are a spiny variety. I hope the seeds work. The not the seeds, the strawberries work, because I've heard that strawberries can be a bit of a pain in the ass at times. One, because they like to spread, that you can control that, and two, because they can, if they decide to be picky, they just won't make big berries. Which you want good big juicy tasty berries. Which is why I'm gonna try and do all the things to make it more like the soil better for them. Um, which is why I'm gonna add coffee grounds to the mix that I plant them in, because they like more acidic soil, and coffee grounds good for adding acidity. I supposedly they like sandy soil, and we've got more clay based soil out here, so I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to incorporate the sandy bit. I mean, I guess I could just buy some sand. I did get I'm sure like a small bag of sand to mix into the soil that I plant them in Wouldn't cost too much. I could probably look into it. Gardening sand, gardening sand. Yeah, it's not bad. Horticultural sand. I could also just get perlite, which says I could use, but I feel like I feel more comfortable with sand, like real sand, not perlite. All-purpose sand, Tractor Supply. Soil amendment. That's like making soil more sandy, right? Don't want tiny plants? No. I'm kind of, I know that they won't really produce much this year. They supposedly make their best berries the year after they're planted, but better to plant them now because they're perennials. But soil amendment is amending the soil, right? To make it more sandy. That sounds right. It's only $7, so mix some of that with potting soil, some coffee grounds. You don't want to add too much coffee grounds because you don't want it to get too acidic. Also, I'm only using it to add acidity to the soil. I'm not using it as fertilizer. Some people use it as fertilizer because it's also pretty nitrogen heavy. Don't want your plants to melt. Yeah, no. Um, but it doesn't have any nutrients other than nitrogen. Doesn't have. It's only nitrogen and acidic. It's not really. It doesn't have much nutrients to actually give the plant. So I only know this because I was like, I now have, because they're these little. I bought. They're marketed as strawberry bulbs, but we all know that strawberries don't grow in bulbs. They're like dormant strawberry plant root clusters. So like they were made dormant the same way that like they go dormant over winter. So they're just little clumps of roots in a bag of dirt. That's a bit different. Yeah. But to be fair, they don't grow well as seeds. And a lot of like places that sell seeds but don't sell like the whole plants because they don't want to take care of the plants. Gonna be starting any plants inside? Yes. I got a seed tray. Those like things with all the little holes, the hexagon holes. Yeah. I won't be starting the strawberries in there because the strawberries you want their roots to fan out and to like support the top weight of the plant. They're more like they're kind of like trees in that their roots are like pretty um like they go out long but they're pretty close to the surface. Um so I'll be putting them in like a pot if I can find one or a plastic bucket. Maybe a plastic cup. Anything with more like surface area than the tiny little seed pods. We got tomato plants, I think two different types of tomato plants. Cherry tomatoes, because my grandma likes those. And a different kind, I can't remember. Really. Like they were some sort of big round normal tomato. They weren't sauce tomatoes. They weren't like oval. They were the round ones. Like the kind you would put on a burger. But not like the weird shaped heirloom ones either. I look forward to lots of plant pics. I am excited. I was I was talking to mom and I was like, so can I, when should I start my garden? Should we go get seeds? And she's like, I don't know if a garden's a good idea. And then later on she's like, okay, what kind of plants do you want to put in your garden? And I'm like, can I have my garden? She's like, you know what, sure, let's have a garden. And I was like, yay. And then I was looking at seeds at the house supply store. Yeah. I'm excited. Grandma was like, she can start her plants in her room. And I'm like, where do you expect me to put those plants, ma'am? On the floor? I mean, I would, but we got a Florida room. We're good. And we're almost like we've been having warmer and warmer days, even though it's still snowing. It's not dipping down to like 9 at night anymore. And I have a plan to the seed trays I bought have plastic lids, so that'll keep them warmer. And I also plan to like start them inside, then move them to the Florida room, and then move them outside. Should probably start the book though, huh? It's book time. We've got the last quarter ish of the book left. I love book noises, the sound of the book. But right now, I think they just entered the Temple of Clearside. It's cold in here, by the way. I'm tempted to turn my heater on. If I turn it on and you can hear it, I'll turn it off. But because we're doing calming reading, and I don't want to interrupt it. But just let me know. I'm gonna turn it on. If it's too loud, let me know. Or if it's audible at all, actually, let me know. Doesn't look like it's too audible. I'm sure it's like an under buzz in my voice, if anything. Sorry, I was cleaning my glasses. They're a little messy. I got chocolate ice cream on my one of my favorite t-shirts. I had to like wash it in the sink because I knew If I just tossed it into the laundry hamper for tomorrow, it would have like stained by the time I got to it tomorrow. So I was like, okay, gotta wash it in the sink. And now that is being an adult, though it doesn't chocolate, while it stains pretty bad, doesn't stain anywhere near as bad as blood. Oh boy. And I don't even mean that in a like, oh, I'm a woman way. It's more, when I was a kid, I was constantly getting scraped up. It's cold water to take out blood? Yeah, definitely. But as a kid, I was constantly getting scraped up, and I didn't think, and just a little bit, just like little bits of blood on my clothes. But I have a couple shirts that permanently have like little brown spots, and it's far too late. All right. So they just got into the Temple of Clearsight. They're sneaking in with Sundew. It's always awkward starting like at the beginning, but then I get into it, you know? Blue had read that the Temple of Clearsight was the most beautiful structure in the world. He knew that it had been built by Clearsight's grandchildren, then partially destroyed hundreds of years later during the war with the Leafwings, and then moved to be reconstructed here, in the heart of Wasphive, where it could be kept safe. Sorry. It's always that, like, rough voice. This is why you, like, gotta... This is what people do, like, me. They, like, do vocal prep. It takes you a bit to get into it. Books had told him that it was made of 60 different kinds of wood, all polished and painstakingly fitted together, so it looked like a perfect miracle. Sing it, Tart. But books couldn't describe the feeling of peace that hit him when he saw it. The temple wasn't an enormous, towering structure, as he'd always imagined. It was no bigger than the cocoon, but built with elegant brilliance and graceful proportions. The columns that lined the front of it were of a wood so dark that it was almost black, embedded with tiny flecks of quartz that looked like distant stars. The roof swept into dragon-tail points at each corner, and a central dome was covered in curved golden wood tiles that look like scales. Hi Sarah, welcome in. We just started, so you haven't missed anything. We were just chatting about my garden this year that I'm going to be starting soon because it's almost growing season. It sat quietly in the center of the vast wooden courtyard, surrounded by reflecting pools and little nooks lined with bookshelves. Even at this hour, Blue saw a few dragons curled here and there, on a bench, beside a pool, on a bamboo mat between shelves, all of them reading. Tiny flame-silk lanterns glowed beside them. A few floated on the water of the pools, and others hung from the rafters of the temple. Another light glowed on the dome, and when Blue looked up, he realized there was a skylight overhead that pierced all the levels, all the way up to the top of the hive. In the distance, he could see the stars, and the corner of one of the moons shining down on the temple. It must be covered with glass to keep the rains out, but it was kept so clean it looked like a direct hole to the sky. The effect was somewhere between Magic Library and Peace Garden, and Blue found himself consumed with sadness that he'd never been here before, and most likely would never be able to come here again. He wished he could live like these Hivewings, with this place at his claw tips every day. He wished he could work for the librarian, taking care of the temple and all these books, sweeping the floors and feeding the koi and keeping it beautiful, and never getting yelled at by angry Leafwings or chased by angry queen zombies. Oh, nice. Hopefully everything grows good this year. I had a bad season last year. My apples were tiny. Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah. That sounds awful. I had I had zucchini last year and they got rotted out like I couldn't see it because the leaves were covering the stem, but the stem got all rotted out and like eaten through with ants, and I only realized it before it was too late. Like, it was literal mush. I mean, I did get some good zucchini out of it. It was at the end of the growing year. It was probably dying anyway, but it was gross. It was gross, my guy. It was nasty. Do not recommend. Next time I grow zucchini, which will not be this year if I ever grow zucchini again. I'm not a huge zucchini fan. I just grew it on a whim. I'll be doing that thing where you tie it and like gradually train it up a post instead of letting it crawl around along the ground, because that was a bad plan. I got some great cucumbers though, and I plan to grow cucumbers again this year. And if I can keep the pests off, that'll be great, because last year I had issues with voles and moles, both, which was very frustrating, and they kept eating my tomatoes. And a couple of my cucumbers. And all of my green bean plants. That's what I forgot. The other thing I'm going to be growing are green beans. Yeah. They, like, my green bean plants didn't even get to bloom. They just, like, they ate the base of them and left the dying tops wrapped around the trellis. It was so sad. I was so angry. I think they also ate my carrots. I just had carrot sprouts and they ate them. Able to get squash blossoms. They were available. I just didn't end up. I didn't eat any of them because I'm not allowed to fry things. Not at least like not. No, I'm not allowed to fry anything deeper than like a splash of oil. Yet I'm learning to cook more. I'm taking on cooking responsibility in the house, so I will slowly be forced to cook more and more. I was talking about it a bit earlier. Today I cooked salmon with carrots in teriyaki and also some Korean ground beef for my mom for her lunches. And on Monday I'll be cooking some chicken carbonara with some bacon. Oh, and some green beans on the side. Yeah. Then I'm gonna be making some meatballs. Gonna making it all. Sounds delicious. Thank you. Instead, he was here to destroy this peaceful place by stealing the one thing it was built around. They walked around the temple as quietly as they could. A long carpet of dark blue silk stretched towards the temple door and muffled their foot talon steps. Golden dragonflies and green lizards were woven in a subtle pattern throughout the carpet. It was more beautiful than even Blue's favorite cocoon weavings and felt impossibly ancient. He glanced sideways at Sundew to see if the aura of the temple had calmed her down at all. She caught him looking and hurried a scowl back onto her face. "Don't you think it's amazing?" he whispered. "No," she whispered back ferociously. She waved her tail at the carvings around them. "How many trees had to die to make this place?" He didn't answer. He felt in his bones that the temple was worth everything it took to make it, but he could also imagine how hard it was for Sundew, mourning the vast forests of trees that used to cover Pantala. Queen Wasp and the Hivewings had destroyed all of that. Not just the Hivewings' homes, but the spirits of the trees not just the Leafwings' homes, but the spirits of the trees they'd clearly loved too. Two Hivewing guards stood on either side of the arched temple door, holding long spears. Blue felt panic stirring in his chest. He tapped Cricket's wings, and she paused, turning back to him. "Sundew and I don't have wristbands," he said softly. "These guards? I think they'll notice." Cricket nodded, as though he'd drawn her attention to an interesting fish. She strolled off the carpet path and over to one of the pools, sitting down beside it and beckoning Sundew and Blue to do the same. "Those aren't the only guards," she murmured when they were beside her. She crouched closer to the water. "There's another pair guarding the inner door, and in the room with the book itself, there's always either 2 more guards or the librarian. The book is in a wooden case, which is locked, and only the librarian has the key." "Where's the librarian if she's not with the book?" Sundew whispered. "She lives in a back room of the temple, so she can be near the book at all times. Once the librarian is chosen, she never leaves the temple again." Blue hadn't known that. Yikes. What would it be like to be a dragon who was never allowed to fly or see the sky? Even though the temple was perfect, he couldn't imagine anyone who'd be happy to be trapped in it forever. "So possibly 6 guards, plus the guardian," Sundew muttered. "You know, it would have been quite helpful if you mentioned any of this earlier today, including during the planning stages." "I forgot until I saw the temple," Cricket said innocently. "Sorry, I haven't been here in a while." Sundew growled softly and started poking through her pouches. Cricket caught Blue's eye and gave him a small, nervous smile. Blue was sure Cricket had remembered the details of the guards all along, but she was still trying to find a way to get out of stealing the book. He wished he could do something to help her. He wished he could think of a way to rescue Luna, protect the tribes from an invasion of Leafwings, save the Book of Clearsight, and escape with his friends, ideally with a minimum of danger, violence, or dragons yelling at him. His heart stopped suddenly. Maybe there was one possible way out of this. The problem was it was risky and insane, but then so was stealing the Book of Clearsight. We could tell the guards, he thought. We could turn in Sundew and expose her disguise. We give her to Queen Wasp. We tell them where Belladonna and Hemlock are hiding, so the soldiers can swoop in and save Swordtail and catch them. We'd be heroes. Wouldn't we? Surely capturing 3 Leafwings and exposing a plot to steal the Book of Clearsight would be the greatest gift they could ever give Queen Wasp. She would have to forgive them for everything else. Wouldn't she? He tried to follow that thought. Would she forgive Swordtail for attacking her soldiers? What about Io? Could she be forgiven too? Would Queen Wasp let Blue and Luna go back to their safe, ordinary lives with their mothers? Maybe if they promised to give all their flame silk to her? Would she let Swordtail and Luna be partnered together? What about his father? Would she set him free too, if he was even still alive? What about all the other flame silks, if there were others? Would she think 3 Leafwings were a fair trade for however many Silkwings she had trapped in her flame silk factory? If not, could he accept his own freedom and Luna's, knowing he'd left others behind? Or what if Queen Wasp took the information, destroyed the Leafwings, and then gave them nothing in return? He might betray Sundew and break his promises, only to end up in 1,000 times as much trouble as before. He'd be walking straight into the Queen's clutches with no leverage. And how would we explain Cricket, he realized. What if telling the Queen about the Leafwings and how we found them and where we've been for the past 3 days means she figures out that Cricket can't be mind-controlled? He needed to help her out of this if he did it. He had no idea how. He needed to ask Cricket for advice. He needed to think, but he didn't have time. Sundew slipped something out of one of her pouches and palmed it. She nodded to Cricket. "Walk straight inside. Don't look guilty." "What are you going to do?" Cricket whispered. "Something effective," Sundew hissed. "Let's go." Cricket led the way back to the silk path and headed toward the front door of the temple. One of the guards was watching them intently, while the other had his gaze focused on his spear. Blue found it harder and harder to breathe. Should he do it now? He could run forward and throw himself on the guard's mercy. If he was going to betray Sundew, he had to do it before they were caught, in order to earn Queen Wasp's gratitude. But, Cricket, is this what she would want? He heard whisking sounds from behind him, like two tiny puffs of air. He glanced back at Sundew. She jerked her chin at him. Keep walking. Cricket had reached the steps of the temple. This was it. The guards would step forward and demand to see their wristbands. They'd arrest him and Sundew on the spot, and it would only be a moment before they realized Sundew's second pair of wings was fake. Turn her in. Turn her in now. Blue took a deep breath and focused on the guard who'd been watching them, which is when he realized the guard wasn't moving. His eyes were still fixed on the carpet where they'd been, several steps back. His black wings, spotted with large yellow and red splotches, were halfway raised, and his mouth was slightly open, as though he'd been about to speak. But he was as still as the statue of Queen Wasp outside. As still as the prisoners on Misbehavior's Way. Blue whipped his head around to the other guard. She was paralyzed the same way, frozen with her spear in her talons and a slight frown on her face. How did Sundew do that? Only Hivewings had that kind of nerve toxin, and only a few of them. And as far as Blue knew, they could only wield it from up close by stabbing little stingers into their victims. But Sundew had done it from a distance somehow, and so quietly that none of the dragons in the temple grounds had even looked up from their books. Unless someone looked up carefully at the guards, it was possible no one would notice they were paralyzed at all for most of the night. Keep moving, Sundew whispered. You're both staring. Cricket shook herself and stepped through the archway. Blue wished he could pull her aside and talk. She must be terrified. At least, he was terrified. The room they stepped into was as tranquil as the grounds outside. To their left, a painting of Clearsight took up almost the entire wall, with small lanterns flickering on either side of it. She looked kind and wise, like Blue had always imagined. Offerings were piled below the painting, bundles of wilting marigolds, tiny silver sugar cakes, little weavings of poems. To their right, the wall was divided into hundreds of small cubby holes in a honeycomb pattern. Most of the holes held scraps of paper, wishes written by dragonclaws, dreams for what they hoped the future would hold, folded and tucked inside. A desk stood in the corner with more paper for anyone who wanted to write one of their own. Blue imagined all the dragons who had come through here, for all their shaking talons asking Clearsight for hope, for luck, for love. Hivewings and Silkwings alike visited the temple and believed in Clearsight. She helped them believe in a better future. Will they lose that faith without the book? If we steal it, does all this fall apart? Will anyone come here anymore? He knew what he wished he could write on one of those scraps of paper. Please keep my friends safe. Please tell me what to do. Cricket didn't pause in the antechamber. She kept walking towards the inner sanctum. Blue, who had slowed down to look around, was able to watch Sundew as she went past him. He saw her lift something to her mouth and swiftly blow into it. Once. Slight tilt to the right. Twice. She had uncanny aim. He saw the moment each guard froze, spears slightly lifted, mouths ajar so they sensed a threat and were about to order them to halt. Whatever she was shooting, the guards were no use to him now. He couldn't hand over Sundew to a pair of statues. How are we going to get out of this? There had to be more than just guards between them and the book. Maybe the case would be impossible to get into. He really hoped it was. Cricket stepped between the two guards, casting them each a nervous glance. Neither of them so much as twitched. With a deep breath, she opened the double doors and stepped into the final room. This one was small and shadowy and perfectly square, like standing inside a wooden box. Blue squinted at the glimmering ceiling and realized that it was inlaid with moonstone stars. The only light in the room was a lantern that hung over the case that held the book. Blue caught his breath. He knew it wasn't the book itself, but the case was carved to look like a book, too. A book with dragons sweeping across the cover and clambering around the spine, tails twining into vines, wings spilling into clouds, eyes like suns. The podium holding up the case was shaped like a leafless tree, branches spreading to support the book. For a moment, he couldn't understand why Queen Wasp had allowed that here, when trees were forbidden in all other art. Then he realized that the podium was probably as old as the temple, from a time long before Queen Wasp's decrees, a time before the forests were destroyed. He stepped to Cricket's side, and she reached to brush his shoulder with her wing. He knew she felt it too, the sacredness of this place, the magic of the Book of Clear Sight. But if Sundew felt it, she didn't let it slow her down. She shoved past them, darted to the podium, and grabbed the case. It didn't move. For a moment she wrestled with it furiously, trying to pick it up, but the case was inextricably joined to the podium. When she tried to pick that up, she discovered it was as firmly rooted to the floor as though it had grown from the wooden planks. With a growl of frustration, Sundew seized the lock and tried to yank it off. Blue realized that, too, would fail, and then her next step was going to be smashing the ancient case. He stepped toward her, trying to raise the nerve to argue with her, and then a voice spoke from the darkest patch of the shadows at the back of the room. "Stop. The Book of Clear Sight is not for you." The librarian stepped into the light, a tall, bony dragon whose scales were the pale orange of unripe apricots, marked with a zigzagging triangle pattern of black along her spine and tail. She wore a dark silk veil that shrouded her face. "Little dragons," she hissed, "I've been expecting you." She knows. She knows everything. The book told her we would try to steal it, just like I knew it would. Blue's heart hammered loudly against his ribs. They were trapped. If I talk fast, maybe I could turn Sundew in. Maybe they don't know where Belladonna and Hemlock are. The Queen might still have mercy on us if we go quietly and tell her everything. If I don't fight, if I follow orders, if I keep my head down and say I'm sorry. But staring into the librarian's hooded face, he knew he couldn't do any of that. He couldn't hand the Leafwings over to the Queen's cruelty. He couldn't bow his head and go back to being obedient, now that he knew about Flame Silks and the mind control and the chrysalis. After seeing the guards closing in on Luna, he knew he'd never trust the Queen again. The librarian took another step forward and tilted her head towards Sundew. A hiss escaped from under the veil. "You're a Leafwing," she snarled. "You seem surprised," Sundew said mockingly. "I thought you were expecting us. Didn't your precious book tell you I'd be a Leafwing?" "A Leafwing, a Silkwing, and a Hivewing," the librarian mused, looking at each of them in turn. She seemed to stare at Cricket the longest. And then suddenly she reached up and ripped off her veil. Cricket gasped. Her eyes were blank and white as pearls. Sorry, I skipped forward. Her eyes were blank and white as pearls. Cricket gasped, flinching backward. "What strange treason is this?" the librarian roared. "Why can't I get inside your mind, worm?" Blue jumped in front of her, not really knowing what he was doing, only that he needed to be between Cricket and the Queen, who could see everything. "I'm the one you're looking for," he cried. "Blue, Luna's brother, the maybe Flame Silk." He rubbed at his arm so the paint flaked off a bit more, and his true colors shone through. "See? I'll turn myself in. Please just let them go." Never, the queen snarled in the librarian's voice. She reached for them with long stingers sliding out from under her claws. And then Sundew cannoned into the librarian's side and slammed her into the wall. The librarian turned with a shriek and slashed at Sundew's face, but Sundew ducked and spun in the same moment, smashing her tail into the librarian's chest. The librarian was bigger and stronger, but the Leafwing fought like a cornered tiger. They wrestled furiously around the tiny space, hissing and clawing and kicking at each other, until Sundew suddenly seized the librarian's head and threw her to the floor. She caught one of the Highwing's wrist as the stinging claws came back for her again, and snapped the arm bone with a brutal crack. The librarian screamed again and stabbed her back claws into Sundew's underbelly. They rolled into the wall, leaving a smear of blood along the floor. What would Clearsight think of us? Blue thought with despair, fighting over her legacy like this. What did she see in this vision, and what did she think of it? Was she proud of the librarian for defending the book? Did she hate us for trying to steal it? He looked up, as though her spirit might be in the moonstones above them, watching the scene unfold. I'm sorry, Clearsight, he thought. I never meant to cause trouble like this. I didn't ask for it. I tried to be good. Something sparked in the stones, a bright reflection that dazzled his eyes for a moment. He looked down and saw where it had come from, an object on the floor that had caught the light of the lantern. A key. The key. It had been torn from the librarian's neck in the struggle with Sundew. He glanced at Cricket, but she was crouched by the door with her talons over her face, and he felt a wave of enormous guilt crash over him. The queen knew Cricket's secret now, and it was all his fault. Her whole life was going to change. Even if they did somehow manage to escape this room, she could never go home. The queen would want to find her and figure out why she couldn't control her. Queen Wasp had taken Luna's life and Blue's life and Cricket's life. She'd taken the free will of her entire tribe. She'd taken the lives of thousands of Leafwings and their beloved trees. It was time someone took something from her. Blue snatched up the key and leapt towards the case. With trembling claws, he fit the key in the lock and turned it. Please forgive me, Clearsight. He felt the weight of all the rules he'd never broken, settling over his scales and sinking into his heart as he opened the lid of the case. There it was. The real Book of Clearsight. It was much, much smaller than he'd expected, and it wasn't bound in gold either. The leather cover was dyed blue, but had no other decoration. It was soft and worn, as though it had been read 1,000,000 times. The pages inside were ancient, flaking around the edges and yellowed with age. It smelled like books, and a far-off hint of pine forest. Wait, Cricket said, and he turned quickly to her, but she wasn't speaking to him. She was talking to Sundew, who had the librarian pinned against the wall. Don't kill her, Cricket said. Why not? Sundew demanded. Her stomach was bleeding and her fake wings had been torn off, along with a few of her pouches. She was breathing heavily, raggedly, as was the guardian. The librarian. Because she's not the one fighting you, Cricket said. She took a step closer and peered into the librarian's eyes. The queen is. Does the queen control you all the time? Is that why you always wear the veil? The answering glare was as blank and white as ever. Queen's a stinker, indeed. It would make sense, Cricket said softly. That's the one way to make sure the librarian never reveals the book's secrets. The tribe thinks 2 dragons share the book's knowledge, but really, only the queen does, because the librarian isn't herself anymore. Ugh. Blue shuddered. He'd thought being trapped in the temple for her whole life was bad enough, but it was even worse. The librarian was trapped in her own mind, unable to get out or make any of her own decisions ever again. Turned off the heater, now I'm warm and good. Sundew studied the dragon with sharp eyes. I heard rumors that the Hivewing Queen could control her subjects, but I thought they were just stories the old ones made up to frighten us. The queen and the librarian barked a laugh. No, she said, it's all true. I can control all of them. That's why every dragon in the hive is on their way to surround the temple right now. I can't move the guards you paralyzed, but I can reach everyone else. The moment you step outside this temple, they will kill you all. But you're not sending them inside, Cricket murmured, because you don't want them to know you control the librarian this way. Let's try something, Sundew said. Hivewing, it's Cricket, Cricket corrected her. Cricket, Sundew amended, and something about using her name made the young Leafwing sound like a real dragon for a moment. Not just a swiftly moving ball of fury. Find my pouch with a large A marked on the outside. Cricket searched the pouches on the floor, then edged close enough to Cricket to poke through the pouches still clasped around her. Found it, she said. Open it very carefully, Sundew instructed, and take out the jar inside, but don't open that until I say so. Any chance you could be a little more ominous about this? Cricket asked wryly. She drew out the jar and held it between her front talons. Now, Sundew said, I want you to open it and shake it on her tail, then get as far away as you can. Cricket upended the jar over the librarian and jumped back to Blue's side. Two small black ants fell out, landed on the librarian's tail, and clung to it with their little wriggling legs. Their antennae searched her scales as though puzzled. What are you doing? The queen demanded. When you're inside a dragon, Sundew said, you can feel everything they can, can't you? Or else you wouldn't have screamed when I broke your arm. Hello, Tart. This is indeed cozy. Your book asset is so cute. Thank you. We're actually, I think, about to do a torture scene. So I think it'll be very big because it's a kid's book. But hi, Snowy. Welcome in. We're the last quarter of the book we're reading, but it does have we do have the next book, and if you do want to go back and listen to all my previous streams, all my previous book reading streams, they are on my YouTube channel, which is just under Tartieth, same as my Twitch. And this one will be posted there later, so as well. It should also just be linked in my links in my bio, but I'm not sure. I can't remember. If it's not, I will check and fix that later. But I'm pretty sure it is. Yes, Cricket answered for her. I know she leaves dragons when they're hurt or dying. Oh, I see your game, the queen scoffed. I can take a lot more pain than a broken arm, though. I'm not afraid of anything you can do to this body. That may be, said Sundew, but I'm guessing that's because you've never been bitten by a bullet ant before. Blue had never even heard of a bullet ant, and from her silence, she guessed the queen hadn't either. They all watched the tiny ants circle for a moment and then start climbing, up the librarian's tail and along her spine. The librarian didn't move and didn't move and didn't move. And then, as one of them ran toward her neck, she flicked her wing instinctively to knock it off her. Instead, it latched onto the wingtip and bit down with little pincer jaws. The scream that came out of the librarian was nothing Blue had ever heard before. She collapsed as though her bones had melted, and Sundew dropped her to the floor, where the dragon lay shaking all over and screaming that terrible scream. Sundew stepped over the patches of blood on the floor, took the jar from Cricket, and neatly scooped up the 2 ants without letting them touch her. She screwed the lid back on very tightly and packed it away again in her pouch. Then she crouched by the librarian's head and peeled open one of her eyelids. Had enough? She asked the white eyeball beneath. This pain is going to last half a day, just so you know. It's not stopping any time soon. I'll kill you for this, the queen hissed, and then abruptly the eye rolled back and became a normal eye. Dark orange irises and dilated pupils stared up at Sundew. The librarian stopped screaming. You did it, she said in a strained voice. Ow, ow, ow. I know it's worth it, but ow, it's hard to really know that right now. I tried once before to hurt myself badly enough that she set me free, but it didn't work. This is so much worse, though. She sat up, holding her wing out at an awkward angle and moaning softly. Is she really gone? Sundew asked. The librarian nodded. Yes. For the first time in years. She inhaled and exhaled slowly, then glanced at her wing and winced again. If she's really gone, then here, Sundew said, digging out a pair of dark green leaves from another pouch. Chew this and spit it on the wound where the ant bit you. It'll deaden the nerve and should dull the pain for a while, at least. Thank you, the librarian said. She put the leaves in her mouth and started chewing. It'll also make your tongue feel very weird, Sundew added, just to warn you. Nyeh. This librarian agreed, making a face. Has the queen been controlling you all this time? Cricket asked. The librarian nodded, talking awkwardly around the leaves in her mouth. Ever since the initiation ceremony, I woke up from the ritual with her inside my head. Then when she sleeps, she makes me sleep. She's always in there. She shuddered. I was so proud to be chosen. I never knew what it would mean. I had no idea she did this. That's horrible, Blue said softly. The book felt fragile and warm in his talons. He wanted to protect it with all his heart, and he was sure anyone who wanted to be the librarian must feel the same way. They didn't need to be brainwashed into it. Queen Wasp didn't even give them a chance to show their loyalty. She forced it upon them instead. She'll be back in your head as soon as she thinks it's safe, Cricket pointed out. I know, the librarian said, nodding, but even a moment to be myself is more than I thought I'd ever have again. She spread the leaf paste over the edge of her wing, and the pain lines around her eyes relaxed. Oh, thank clear sight. Sundew glanced across at Blue. So, she said, we have the book, which is great, but we're surrounded by hive zombies who would really like to kill us, which is less great. Can you throw bullet ants at them? He asked, or blow dart them? I don't have many more blow darts, she said. Or enough bullet ants for everyone in the whole hive, although that would be my kind of revenge. She started collecting the pouches she lost during the fight, checking their contents and resettling them around her. She kicked the pair of fake wings into the corner. I'll help you, the librarian said quietly. You will? Blue said, surprised. But we're stealing the book. Your whole purpose in life is to keep it safe. The librarian looked at the book in his talons, and her eyes were sadder than any dragons he'd ever seen before. I think it's time someone else knew the book's secrets, she said, and if the queen kills me for it, I'll still be better off than I was this morning. How can you help us? Sundew asked practically. Is there another way out of here? Not exactly, she answered, but I can get you up to the dome, at least. The librarian got to her feet, wincing from the other wounds Sundew had given her, and limped to the back corner where she'd first appeared. She couldn't put any weight on her broken arm, and Blue wondered if Sundew felt anywhere near as terrible as he did about that. A secret panel in the wooden wall slid aside at her touch. and they all followed her through the librarian's quarters. Compared to the other rooms of the temple, this one felt cold and empty. A bamboo mat sat in the corner, and a small bookshelf were the only two items in the room. It looks like a prison cell, Blue thought. The position of librarian was supposed to be the tribe's greatest honor, but instead it was a trick, a snare set to trap one of the brightest minds of the Hivewings and keep her useless forever. Another panel slid aside to reveal a spiral staircase going up. They climbed after the librarian, rounding the last curve to find themselves in an attic that smelled of wood chips and boiled silk. The underside of the dome curved over their heads, and Blue saw a door to one side that led to a small balcony. What was this for? Cricket asked, blinking around at the dust and abandoned boxes. She picked up an odd-looking tool that looked a bit like a curved dragon tongue. I think librarians used to make books up here, the librarian said wistfully. Oh, Cricket said. She ran one claw along the top of a dusty table. That's what I thought they did too. Not anymore. Not in a long time. The librarian led the way to the balcony door and peeked out through the glass. Oh dear. Sundew edged in beside her and looked out as well. She snorted. I can take 'em. Every Hivewing in Wasp Hive? Cricket said. You are terrifying, but I still find that a little hard to believe. Unless you have something else alarming in one of those pouches? Blue said hopefully. Sundew tapped the floor thoughtfully with one claw. Maybe, she said, but I'd need fire to make it work. I have fire, Cricket said. She scrambled to pull out the little stone jar with a flame silk thread inside and tipped it to show Sundew. Would this work? The Leafwing eyes gleamed. Be careful, the librarian pleaded as Sundew took the jar in her claws. Don't set the temple on fire. You can have the book, but please leave the temple. Sundew hesitated as though she would have loved to set the whole hive on fire, but after a moment she nodded. Stand back. She took a branch covered with long, waxy-looking red-brown leaves out of another pouch. With careful, slow movements, she dipped the point of each one into the jar until it touched the flame silk and caught fire. A bright flame flared for a moment on each leaf, then vanished into curls of reddish smoke. Sundew handed the jar back to Cricket and opened the door to the balcony, holding the burning branch out away from her. Now Blue could see the temple grounds, and the Hivewings, who covered every inch of space between the temple and the door. Orange, yellow, red, and black scales rippled like a vast sea of poisonous snakes. As Sundew stepped onto the balcony of the dome, every head snapped toward her in unison, blank eyes latching onto her. One branch of burning leaves seemed very small in the face of all those talons and teeth and claws. Blue shivered and felt Cricket put one wing over his back and lean against him. I should be comforting her, he thought. I'm the one who's ruined her life. But if she was still willing to be close to him, perhaps she forgave him. Perhaps she still liked him, anyway. Sundew hissed at the crowd of Hivewings. Smoke was rolling off the leaves now, growing thicker and redder and darker. She glanced at it one more time, checking that it was all smoke and no flames, and then she threw it with all her might directly into the middle of the watching dragons. It hit a yellow-black dragon, who shook it off and hopped away with a yelp. The dragons closest to him began coughing. They sank to the ground, one by one, hacking and wheezing, as the smoke billowed up and out, swallowing the dragons around it. But it wasn't enough. For each Hivewing incapacitated by the smoke, there were 5 more still grimly standing between them and the only way out. Capture the flame silk, they intoned. Kill the other 2. The buzz of their wings filled the chamber as dragon after dragon rose into the air, surged toward the dome. Blue's heartbeat surged with panic. Wait, that's not the only way out. He looked up. There was the skylight. The hole was barely large enough for a dragon to fit through, but he and Cricket and Sundew were all fairly small. If they could break the glass at the top, they could at least get out outside the hive. Up! He shouted, grabbing Cricket's arm and pointing. We can go out the skylight! She followed his gaze, then looked back at him. What about you? She asked. How do we get you up there? Oh. He twisted to look back at his wing buds, as though perhaps they'd have magically turned into wings in the last several heartbeats. We'll carry him. Sundew threw open her wings and leapt off the balcony. Let's go, and hold on to that book. She started smashing Hivewings aside with her tail and talons. He clutched the book to his chest. Cricket whirled around in a panic and grabbed a long, twisted silk rope from one of the tables. She and the librarian threw it around Blue's shoulders and chest and tied it fast. They each took an end and ran to the balcony. I wish I had wings, Blue thought, closing his eyes. I wish I were more than a dead weight for my friends to drag around. The rope jerked tight under his arms, and he was dragged back into the balcony railing, nearly tumbling over it, where the rope steadied, and he felt himself lifted up into the air. He tilted sideways almost immediately as the librarian's bigger wings soared ahead, and Cricket faltered under his weight. Then Sundew swept up beside her and took the rope as well, tugging him upright. All he could do was dangle helplessly, holding on to the book for dear life. Right below his talons, the smoke still billowed, and the seething mass of Hivewings snapped and churned. 3 of them surged toward his feet, and he kicked at them frantically. Eck! Help! He shouted. A cascade of little red centipedes poured down from above him. Each dragon they struck let out a shriek of alarm or pain and dropped away, clawing at their face. The dome was shrinking below him. Blue looked up and saw Sundew, then Cricket duck into the skylight hole. The librarian was hovering beside it, taking up the slack in his rope, waiting to let them go first. And then, suddenly, she looked down at him, and her eyes were white again. Nice try, she said. Cricket! Blue screamed. The librarian's claws slashed the rope connecting him to his friends. He tumbled sideways, jerking to a stop at the end of the severed rope, but feeling the knot start to slip loose around his chest. Cricket shot back down the shaft and flew at the librarian's face. The librarian ducked away, gave her an evil grin, and let Blue's rope fall from her hands. His stomach flipped as he started to plummet, then jerked to a stop again as Cricket caught the end of the rope, but she wasn't strong enough to lift him alone. Even with her wings beating as hard as she could, they were both sinking down towards the Hivewings. Cricket, he yelled, you have to go without me. They won't kill me, but they're under orders to kill you. Take the book and go. I'm not... She started to shout back, but he was already tossing the book up toward her. He had to drop the rope. She had to drop the rope to catch it. She did it instinctively, as he'd known she would. She was just as well trained to love the book as he was. All their lives, they'd known it was the most precious object in their world. She'd reach for it without thinking, even if her conscious mind would have chosen to save Blue instead. As he fell, as 1,000 claws reached up to seize him, he saw Cricket clutch the book to her chest and shout his name. He saw Sundew pummel the librarian hard enough to knock the Hivewing out of the air. He saw Sundew grab Cricket's arm and pull her away, and he saw Cricket's last look back, and he saw their tails disappearing away up the skylight. And then all he could see was orange and yellow and black and red as the talons closed around him, and the Queen had him in her grasp at last. Oh, poor guy. Blue was dragged roughly through the hive tunnels. The Queen had dispatched 5 dragons to take him away, which was 4 too many for a dragon as harmless as Blue. They kept stepping on one another's toes and growling and bumping wings and all trying to hold on to his elbows at once, which he definitely did not have enough elbows for them to do. Their eyes were their own again, so the Queen had apparently decided she didn't need to be concerned about Blue anymore, which meant all the rest of her brainwashed subjects were off hunting for Cricket and Sundew. Did they get away? Are they all right? He worried and worried about this as he was shoved between blustering hive wings. They were descending through the levels, but to where, Blue had no idea. He kept expecting the queen herself to appear. He jumped each time they turned onto a level with black and yellow stripes. They reached the bottom level with no sign of her, though. The queens pushed him out onto the streets of warehouses he'd seen on the way in. One flicked her wings at him, and he realized the tips were sharp little stingers, probably venomous. Another kept baring his fangs, so those could probably kill him with just a scratch, too. Where are they taking me? Blue wondered, staring at the blank walls as they marched past. How am I going to be punished? He remembered the tortured faces on Misbehavior's way and shivered. This feeling of being in trouble, of having done something wrong, of knowing so many dragons were angry at you, this was everything he'd tried to avoid his whole life. He hated it. He wanted to go back to his desk and get all the answers written on the quiz and have the teacher smile and say, "Good work, Blue." He wanted to dig out his Good Citizenship Award and show it to these Hivewings to prove he wasn't as bad a dragon as they thought he was. But I'm not. I mean, I've done all the things they think I have, but that doesn't make me bad. He clung to that thought like it was a harness and someone was lifting him through the sky. Yes, I broke Highwing rules, but I had good reasons to. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted to find my sister and set her free. Queen Wasp didn't have to be so secretive and menacing and terrifying in the first place. The Hivewing stopped suddenly in front of a blocky building that looked exactly the same as all the others. The only difference was a carving on the gray door, this time of a small lantern, little sparks coming off it to indicate it was glowing. Blue suddenly had a guess about where he was going. One of the Hivewings pounded on the door in a series of knocks, 3 quick, 4 slow, 2 quick. After a moment it was flung open, revealing a wizened, mostly orange dragon with black patches here and there. He gestured for them to come inside and slammed the door behind them. Shapes loomed around them in the dim interior, giant crates, as far as Blue could tell, stacked up to the ceiling. They maneuvered between these, left, right, left again, until Blue lost track, but he thought they were about in the center of the warehouse when they reached a wide-open, well-lit space surrounded by a circle of watchful Hivewing guards. At first, Blue thought they were staring into empty space, or perhaps at one another across the way. It wasn't until he got closer that he realized they were looking down through an enormous sheet of glass at a stone cavern below the floor. That was also where all the light was coming from. The dragon from the door shoved him past the guards before Blue could take a close look, but he caught a glimpse of cauldrons that seemed to be full of molten gold and dragons moving between them. Shortly beyond the circle of guards, the old dragon shoved aside a crate and heaved open a trapdoor underneath, revealing a set of stairs descending into the earth. He stared down, and Blue's guards nudged him into following. Lamps punctured the turns of the stairwell, but they seemed unnecessary. The glow from the light at the bottom of the stairs could have illuminated a stairwell 3 times as long. Blue had to shield his eyes and blink hard for a moment when they reached the bottom. His head ached as though he'd walked right up to the sun. "What's this?" a gruff voice demanded, while Blue's eyes were still adjusting. "The flame silk everyone's been looking for," came the answer. "Can't be." Someone poked his shoulder. "Wrong color." Did his scales just fall off?" "It's paint or something," said the other dragon. She started scraping at his scales with her claws. "Yeesh, look, it comes off. Fetch a scrubber. Wait, this little scrap is the dragon we've been hunting across the savannah?" Someone else chimed in. "He's not a flame silk. He hasn't even got wings or silk yet." "We knew that, idiot," said the first voice. He's just probably a flame silk. We have to keep an eye on him in case he is." "Oh, boring. When's his metamorphosis?" "Dunno. Soon, I reckon." Blue's heart gave a nervous jump. It was soon. Really soon. He kept forgetting to worry about it. His was supposed to start right after Luna's ended. Would he have to spin his cocoon here? Far away from his mother, his hive, and the cocoon where he'd always expected to transform? He felt his wrists gingerly. They seemed normal, no pain, no burning feelings. What if he went through his metamorphosis and wasn't a flame silk? What would the queen do with him then? Sending him back home to Burneth and Silverspot didn't seem like the most likely option, somehow. Someone arrived with scrubbing brushes and briskly scored the paint off his scales. He stood still and didn't struggle. There wasn't much point in being a different color now, after all. Besides, his eyes were finally adjusting to the light, and he was transfixed by his new surroundings. They were standing on a ledge at the bottom of the stairs, looking out over the cave he'd glimpsed from above. If he looked up, he could see the green, yellow, orange glow of the eyes watching through the glass ceiling. More hiving guards were stationed down here, peering into the cauldrons, and occasionally poking working silkwings with their tails or spears. Several of those silkwings were ordinary dragons, doing ordinary work, transporting cargo, carrying food and water, cleaning, putting out fires, but the rest... the rest were flame silks. Oh no, I lost my lid. My water bottle. It's okay. Blue counted 9 at first glance. They were scattered across the cavern, each on his or her own rocky perch. 4 of them were asleep, 2 were eating, the other 3 had their wrists extended, fiery silk threads spilling out into the massive stone cauldrons set below them. He stared at them, trying to guess which one was his father. The large bored one, who looked like he might fall asleep and topple into his own silk fire. The lime-striped one, who was nibbling a persimmon as though it had greatly offended him, but he decided to eat it anyway. The one with pale pink wings, whose talons twitched constantly in his sleep. And then, at last, he saw what he most wanted to see. An incandescent gold cocoon tucked in its own hollow on the far side of the cave. Luna. He took a step toward her, hesitated, and looked back at the guards. The scrubbing brushes had been carted away. His original escorts had gone back up the stairs, leaving the 1 guard from the door and the 3 who'd come to investigate his arrival. These 4 were all leaning on their spears or chewing on strips of dried gazelle, chatting to one another. One of them noticed his glance. She grinned at him with all her teeth. "Go ahead," she said. "Get used to the place. I gather you're gonna be here for a while." The others chuckled, although Blue didn't think it was really the most clever, menacing comment she could have come up with. He took another few steps away, but they all went back to their conversations and ignored him. "I guess I really can walk around." He'd expected a cage, or a paralyzing nerve toxin, or some kind of beating, perhaps, but maybe this was the Queen's way of letting him know how unimportant he was, or how trapped. He could wander as far as he liked because there was nowhere to go and no way out. Blue clambered down from the ledge, hopping from rocky foothold to craggy stalagmite, until he reached the same level of the cavern as Luna's cocoon. Behind him he heard the hiving guards laughing, and he wondered if they were mocking his winglessness. Well, I won't be wingless much longer. His biggest fear, his metamorphosis, was only days away. It didn't seem fair that he'd have to deal with that, too, in the middle of everything else terrifying. His route to the cocoon led him past the bored-looking Flamesilk, who glanced up with a spark of interest in his eyes. "Hey," said the Flamesilk in a lazy but commanding voice. "Who are you?" Blue hesitated. He didn't want to alienate anyone who might be a friend down here, and for all he knew, this could be Admiral. "I'm Blue," he said. "My sister's in that cocoon over there." "Oh," said the other dragon. He shook one of his wrists vigorously, watched the silk spool for a moment, then turned his gaze back to Blue. "Right. The new blood. Did you know we were coming?" Blue asked. "Some of us hoped," he answered. "Ad's been counting the days." He nodded over at Luna's cocoon, and Blue finally noticed there was a dragon sitting next to us. "Ad, Admiral. Blue moved closer, studying his father. Admiral was a shimmering blue-green, somewhere between Blue's bright morpho butterfly blue and Luna's elegant caterpillar color. He had darker purple streaks along his wings and matching spots of white on each one. His eyes were brown, with a faint gold tinge to them, and he traced one claw around and around in an infinity loop on the ground as he watched Luna's cocoon. For a long moment he didn't look up, even when Blue stopped right in front of right across the cocoon from him. But at last Admiral raised his head and saw his son. His eyes lit up. "You're the one," he said. "You're early." "Oh, yes," Blue said. He gestured vaguely at the guards on the entrance ledge. "I was, well, captured, I guess." That part was in, like, italics, not said aloud. "I'm so glad you're here," Admiral said warmly. "I'm your father. I'm Admiral." "I know," Blue said. "My name's Blue. Wait, you're glad we're here?" "Glad that Luna and I are trapped down here, just like you? We have such an important job," Admiral said, rubbing his wrists. "So important. When do you think she'll wake up?" Blue calculated backward. "Not tomorrow night. The night after that," he said. "That would be 5 days from when she went in." Admiral nodded. "I can't believe one of mine is a flame silk," he said. "And maybe both. Clubtail was taken out to have eggs a year before me, but neither of his had any flame whatsoever." His chest swelled with pride. "But," Blue looked around at the cavern again. "Isn't it... Sorry, but isn't it kind of terrible being a flame silk?" "Terrible? Gosh, no," said Admiral. "I mean, I'd make some changes. I'm working on that." "Working on what?" Blue asked. Was his father also part of a secret resistance? Admiral waved at a rocky nest nearby, where piles of paper were neatly stacked along along the stone shelves around it, each stack tied with a pale gold thread. "Changing the system," he said. "Solving problems." "With papers?" Blue squinted at them. "They're letters," Admiral said patiently. "My copies of them, obviously. I write one to the Queen every 7 days, outlining the current problems I see and offering proposals for fixing them." "Oh," Blue said, impressed. "That was a lot of letters. So she writes back, or she comes to visit you?" "Well, neither," said Admiral. "But she's very busy. Lots of hives to run, 2 tribes to manage, leaf wings to guard against. The dip in flame silk production is just one of her many problems, which I'm going to help solve." "There's a flame silk shortage?" Blue said. "No," said Admiral unconvincingly. "And it's not a problem because we're solving it with her help," he added, nodding at Luna's cocoon, "and hopefully yours." Blue stared at him in alarm. "Was this your idea?" he asked. "Fathering potential flame silks so more dragons could be trapped in this cave?" "Well, no," his father admitted. "The Queen came up with that. Very clever, and works out well for me because A, better company, and B, more signatures for my petitions." "Petitions," Blue echoed. "My suggestion was longer rest cycles between production and more citrus in our diet, which we got. The citrus, I mean. Tangerines for everyone with every meal. Every meal. Really makes you wish for a lemon or a banana now and then. Good for us, though. She vetoed the longer rest cycles." "That's all right." "So what else have you changed?" "Oh, lots of things," Admiral said with a modest shrug. "I started almost as soon as I got here, once I realized there was a system, and a way to accomplish real change within that system." "Yeah?" Blue was intrigued. Doing things inside the rules, that sounded like something he could handle a bit better than Swordtail and Luna's revolution. Maybe his father could teach him how to do it. Maybe there was a way to be a good dragon, stay out of trouble, and still make things better. Oh, Blue. Although, tangerines were not quite the epic change Blue wanted to see in the world. Can I read some of your letters? Blue asked. Of course. Admiral leapt excitedly to his feet and bounded over to his alcove. He came back with an armful of papers and laid them out in front of Blue. Wait, is this flame silk? Blue asked, touching the thread that tied one stack together. He squinted at it, puzzled. Why isn't it setting the letters on fire? Admiral laughed. This is great! I feel like such a dad. I get to teach you so much. There are different kinds of flame silk, buddy. It wouldn't be much good to us if it only burned everything in sight. We need the kind for building webs, too. Something we can sleep on. Stickier silk for climbing with. We can choose which kind we produce. He tipped his wrists up, flexed his claws, and glanced at the nearest guard, who wasn't paying any attention to them. I'll show you later. Not a good idea to waste any silk, you know? Blue flipped through the letters, thinking about this new information. It was quite a relief to hear that he wouldn't accidentally set the world on fire every time he used his silk. Maybe going through metamorphosis with his flame silk parent nearby was actually a good idea. Maybe the Queen was trying to help me and Luna by bringing us here. And yet, he glanced around at the cavern. The flame silk dragons looked fine. They didn't seem miserable, but if they were so important and the Queen was willing to listen to them, why were they kept imprisoned in this cavern? Why were they such a big secret, at least from most other Silkwings? Why weren't they allowed to choose this life or something else? Father, Blue said, do any flame silks ever leave this place? Sure, Admiral said unexpectedly. I mean, I left, didn't I? Long enough to have you. Right, but how long was that for? Blue asked. Did you get to decide when and where you went, or who you were with? Well, no, Admiral said. But it was a lovely visit. Cicada Hive is so pretty. That mosaic garden. Wow. Have you gone anywhere else? Blue asked. How often do you leave? Admiral scratched up his snout as though he was counting in his head. Blue leaned forward hopefully. Right. That was it, actually. That one time. In your whole life? Blue asked, dismayed. You spent your whole life in this one cave? Oh, no, said Admiral. I grew up in Hornet Hive, didn't move here until my metamorphosis. Went into my cocoon there, woke up there. Quite a surprise, really delightful, once I realized how important we are and what an honor this is. Blue regarded him skeptically. Haven't you ever asked the Queen if you could leave? Sure, Admiral said. That stack on the end is vacation time requests and field trip proposals, and some of my theories on how more flying might improve our silk production. Afraid I don't have any good evidence for that, though. More of a wishful thinking kind of hypothesis. I realize that. Completely reasonable that she always says no. Blue picked up another letter. His father's handwriting was neat and very legible. His spelling was perfect, his sentences concise and convincing. This one was a politely worded outline for a proposal for a skylight or anything like a window, suggesting that a little sun on their scales might also be beneficial for their silk output. There were several letters below it along the same lines, with modifications to the proposal to make it as cost-effective or easy to accomplish as possible. One even included a drawing of a sequence of mirrors that could bring the sunshine to them via a long path of reflections. Blue could clearly see, from looking at the cavern, that every one of these letters had been ignored. Who's the midget? One of the other flame silks, the one with green stripes, shouted at Admiral. Is that your offspring? He's scrawny like you. Is he a Vaucus earthworm, too? Mind your own business, Admiral roared. He doesn't need to hear your toad-sucking voice. Better than your millipedian claw-waving folderol, the dragon yelled. Are you poisoning his ears with your stupid ideas already? Did you tell him the Queen chews up all your letters and spits them out because they're the dumbest things she's ever read? That's not true, and it would help if certain dragons weren't such trolls about everything, Admiral yelled back, as if anyone would ever believe that less citrus might be helpful. I swear, he said to Blue, I think he sneaks over and reads my letters just so he can write ones arguing for the exact opposite of anything I propose. Who is that? Blue asked, wide-eyed. Why is he so mean? That's Fritillary, Admiral growled. He just wants everyone to hate the world as much as he does. Don't talk to him. He made an effort to smile at Blue. See, this is why I'm glad you're here. It'll be nice to have someone new to talk to, someone with a little perspective, someone who knows how to look on the bright side. You do know how to look on the bright side, don't you? I guess I do, Blue said. Wasn't that what he'd spent his whole life doing? Finding a silver lining to any cloud, convincing himself that there was nothing wrong with how Silkwings were treated, ignoring Luna's complaints, assuming that their safety was worth sacrificing a few freedoms. He looked down at the letters in his talons again. After all these years of trying to work with Queen Wasp's rules, in Queen Wasp's hive, under Queen Wasp's control, had his father accomplished no more than a handful of tangerines? Had he accepted the loss of all his freedom because he thought he could find a way to make it work? Didn't he want more out of his life? Didn't he want to fight back? Do I? It was like Cricket said. Some rules were unjust, and some things were more important than following the rules. He put down the letters and rested his front talons on Luna's warm golden cocoon. It was very hot, but it didn't burn him. This is not going to be our life, Luna, he promised silently. I won't spend the next 100 years writing fruitless letters Father's way. I won't spend the next 100 years writing fruitless letters. Father's way, obeying the system, hasn't worked. So we'll find another, or we'll burn it all down. Admiral found a place for Blue close to his own nest, a hollow in the rock large enough for a dragon to settle into, with several crannies in the wall where he could keep things, if he ever had any things. Apparently there was a request process involving a number of forms. At first the hollow seemed a little too big to Blue. And then he felt a shiver across his wings as he realized his father was thinking of Blue's future, and how much bigger he might grow. Admiral had chosen a nest where Blue could spend the entire rest of his life. But I'm not going to. That's not going to happen. He tried to believe it as he lay down to sleep, but his dreams were restless and unhappy. He dreamed of getting his talons stuck in a crevice and trying to pull them out. He dreamed of letters piling up around his claws. He dreamed of Clearsight, sitting on the steps of her temple, looking down at him with enormous disappointment. When he woke up, his wrists were itching. Hi, gamer. Welcome in. Congrats on second. Hello, hello. Am I going to be a flame silk? The cavern was quiet. Most of the regular silkwings were gone, and 7 of the flame silks were asleep. Blue climbed down to Luna's cocoon and leaned against it. He wished he could talk to his sister, or Cricket. Is Cricket all right? Did she escape? Or... His mind shied away from the alternative. He couldn't imagine the world without Cricket in it. He couldn't imagine his own life without Cricket in it. A high-winged guard came stomping over, and Blue sat up hopefully. Maybe this dragon could tell him something about what had happened. But the guard went right past him and jabbed Admiral in the side with one of her sharp claws. Admiral woke up with a snort, blinking rapidly. Time to spin, the guard snarled. You're late. So sorry, Admiral said, rubbing his eyes. You're quite right. I've been a little discombobulated by the arrival of my children, of course. Otherwise, I'm always on time, aren't I? Very punctual, dragon. That's me. Very little reminding required, don't you agree? Quit your yapping and excusing, the guard grumbled. Silk. Now. She dragged a cauldron out from under Admiral's nest and thunked it into place right below him. Of course. Admiral held out his arms and closed his eyes. A long dragging moment passed, and then a thread of flame emerged from one wrist. It spiraled down into the cauldron, pouring slowly, like cold honey. It was another long moment before a second thread appeared from the other wrist, and this one seemed dimmer than the first. The guard scowled at the slow-moving silk, and Blue wondered what she was feeling. Was she worried about what would happen to the hives if there was a flame silk shortage, or did the guards get punished if the flame silks didn't meet a certain quota? Or was there any chance she was actually concerned about the dragons under her care? What a weird life this would be, he thought. Every morning you wake up and go through a secret warehouse staircase into an underground cavern. You spend the next day poking other dragons to make them work and sending guards they can't leave. Isn't it boring? It must be boring, especially for the ones sitting in a circle in the dark warehouse, staring through the glass all day. Thank you for the hydrate. Yeah. That water bottle had like a slight hint of plastic, but honestly, much better than that one like Niagara water bottle. It tasted gross like tap water. So I will not complain. The hive wings turned to leave, and Admiral's eyes popped open. Sandfly, he said quickly. Have you met my son? This is Blue. He says my daughter's name is Luna, and she'll be coming out tomorrow night with her wings and silk to add to the quota. Isn't that wonderful? Sandfly looked down at Blue and the gold cocoon. She didn't say anything for a few heartbeats. Her scales were pale yellow and speckled everywhere with tiny black spots, like a swarm of flies in the desert. It was very easy to see how her parents had chosen her name. They're very young, she said at length. Blue couldn't tell if she was feeling sorry for them with a life of imprisonment lying ahead, or if she was pleased with the idea of how much silk they'd be able to produce over the length of that life. Excuse me. He said. Sorry to bother you. I was wondering, do you know what happened to the dragons who stole the Book of Clearsight yesterday? Sandfly leapt backward as though he jabbed her with an electric eel. What? She roared. Half the sleeping heads in the cavern popped up and turned their way. That didn't happen. No one would dare. Oh. Blue trailed off. It hadn't occurred to him that the queen would lie to everyone about this, and make the librarian lie too. But now that he thought about it, he wasn't surprised. Losing the Book of Clearsight would be pretty terrible for morale. She could just easily close up the case and pretend it was still in there. That is, if Cricket and Sundew did escape with the book. What a horrible thing to say! Sandfly barked. Behind her, Admiral gave Blue a pained, fix this expression. I'm sorry, Blue said. I'm so sorry. I meant the dragons who tried to steal the Book of Clearsight. Of course the librarian stopped him. Of course it's safe. Those dragons, though, do you know if they got away? Sandfly was shaking out her wings as though they were crawling with caterpillars. Ugh, she said. I'm gonna have nightmares for days. What kind of traitor would steal the Book of Clearsight? That's so obviously wrong. So obviously wrong. Blue stared down at his talons, the talons that had unlocked the case and lifted out the precious book. It was me. I'm the traitor. But the librarian had wanted them to have it when she was herself. She said it was time for other dragons to know the book's secrets. He decided not to mention that, in case Sandfly had another heart attack. He was also carefully avoiding the fact that one of the criminal dragons was the Leafwing, in case that wasn't public knowledge and might set off a riot. Right, he said, trying one more time. So the queen really wanted to catch them, but did she? I have no idea. Sandfly said. She settled her wings again. I was down here until midnight last night. No one at home mentioned any public executions yesterday, but maybe they'll be held today or tomorrow. Blue managed not to gasp or burst into tears. She assumes they were caught because she's a Hivewing, but she doesn't actually know. They might be safe. Or they might be in another prison somewhere, waiting to be executed. If only he could escape and go look for them. But he didn't have Cricket's clever ideas, or Swordtail's impulsive courage, or Sundew's helpful pouches of weapons. He was just a little wingless dragon, stuck in a cavern of flame. Still, he could at least try. Blue spent the rest of the day exploring every corner of the Flamesilk Cave. He walked the entire perimeter, clambering up and down the rocks wherever he needed to. The guards by the staircase gave him weird looks as he went by, but they didn't stop him. Nobody stopped him, although he got the distinct feeling that all the Flamesilks were watching him whenever they thought he wasn't looking. There were 3 female Flamesilks and 7 males, most of them quite a lot older than Blue. He guessed that Admiral might be the youngest one the Queen had. A couple of them seemed to stay in their nests all the time, cycling between sleeping, eating, and producing silk, without ever moving from their spots. He saw a few others get up and fly around, although they couldn't go far. There was enough room to spread their wings, but they couldn't soar, and there wasn't any wind to ride. If this is my future, will I never get to fly in the clouds? How will I even learn to fly properly without any wind currents down here? Guards in the Flamesilk seemed to have a very precise schedule in their heads. They rotated production cycles and rest intervals and careful synchronization, so there were always at least 3 Flamesilks working, even in the middle of the night. Blue had covered almost the entire cave by the time his father's turn at the cauldron was done. There were a few ledges and corners that he hadn't figured out how to climb up to yet, but he had walked between all the stalagmites and surreptitiously poked his nose in every large gap in the rocks. So far he hadn't found any secret passages, though. From across the cave, he saw Sandfly drop a bucket of food beside Admiral and roll the cauldron away. He started back, his head full of questions. "Hello, dear," one of the Flamesilks said, popping her head over the edge of her nest just as he was about to pass her. He jumped, and she giggled. "I'm Danaid. My, aren't you a shiny one? We haven't any visitors in so long, and now we have 2 new Flamesilks. How delightful." She sighed happily. Her scales were so orange she almost looked like a Hivewing, but there was no black among them. Instead, flecks of white dotted her spine, and long streaks of white striped her wings. She looked old enough to be Blue's great-grandmother. "I might not be a Flamesilk," Blue said, checking his wrists again. "Not to worry," she said. "I'm sure you'll still be delightful company. Better than all these grousing old dragons anyhow. Some of them can't keep a secret." She shot an irritated look at the pale pink Flamesilk. "And some of them think very highly of themselves." "I can hear you," Fritillary shouted from his nest. "We all can," called another. "I know," Danaid shouted back. "We're in a cave, but I'm having a private conversation, so stick your snouts somewhere else." "I told you! I thought you wanted me to tell Fritillary that you liked his stripes," the pink Silkwing said in a wounded voice. "Aren't you ever going to forgive me?" "Well, I don't like them anymore," Danaid snapped. "I think they make him look skinny and arrogant and potato-brained." "You wish you were as smart as a potato," Fritillary bellowed. "Go suck a lime," Danaid shouted. "I hope your face gets eaten by dung beetles." Now, settle down," said one of the Hivewing guards in a bored voice. "Anyway, where were we?" Danaid said to Blue, her voice suddenly all sweetness again. "And it wasn't my fault that Festoon overheard me telling Heliconian that you thought he was stealing all the radishes," the pink dragon went on querulously. "You should be mad at him for eavesdropping, not me." "I was," Danaid snapped, "but he died 5 years ago, you half-wit." Oh, right. The pink dragon flopped sideways in his nest. Ignore them, sweetheart, Danaid said to Blue. Is it always like this? Blue asked. He waved his hands at the flame silks. Like what? Danaid asked cheerfully. The arguing? He'd seen at least 3 other shouting matches erupt that morning while he'd been searching the cave. Who's arguing? Danaid said. Was it old Frittleri? He's the worst. Don't talk to him. Zeneca is terrible, too. Always gossiping and bad-mouthing everyone. You already know you can't trust Pyrid over there. The pink flame silk let out a grumbling sigh and turned his head away from them. Clubtail is perfectly nice, but by all the hives he never stops talking. Heliconian ruins everything. She flipped her tail over the side of the nest and smiled at Blue. Really, I'm the only one worth knowing. Danaid, stop poisoning my son's mind, Admiral said, appearing at Blue's side suddenly. He's on my side, not yours. There are sides? Blue said, confused. No, Admiral said, but Danaid is definitely on the wrong one. Let me introduce you to the dragons you should be friends with. Danaid hissed at him. You can't keep the new friends all to yourself, she cried. New friends are for sharing. Let him decide for himself who he wants to talk to. Eat bugs, Danaid, Admiral said sharply. He led Blue away, his snout in the air. Isn't she dreadful? He asked, loud enough for the orange silkwing to overhear. She seemed all right to me, Blue said. No, Admiral said. She's dreadful. What is going on? Blue asked, bewildered. With what? Admiral paused to toss Blue a tangerine, smiling. It's just, you guys seem to spend a lot of time fighting with each other, Blue pointed out. Do we? Admiral looked surprised. No more than most dragons, I'm sure. Way more than the dragons I know, Blue said. Admiral flipped one of his wings dismissively. Well, I suppose we've all been stuck together for so long. There's bound to be a little tension here and there. Come meet Zeneca, though. She's very sweet and always has clever things to say about the others. AKA gossip. Zeneca shared her kale and kumquats. Blah, blah, blah. Zeneca shared her kale and kumquats with them and spent their entire conversation glancing around the cave to make sure everyone else saw that she was officially getting to meet the new Silkwing first. She also made a point of warning Blue away from Danaid and a few other flame silks. This went on with each dragon Blue met, and by the time he wound up back in his nest, he was exhausted. He couldn't keep track of who hated who, except they all seemed to hate Frittleri, which was mutual. The cavern was seething with petty rivalries, long-held grudges, and easily provoked tempers. He flopped down next to Luna's cocoon and rested his head against it. He couldn't wait for his sensible, funny, normal sister to come out. No wonder they're starved for new company. Being trapped in here so long has turned them all super weird. Almost my turn again, Admiral said, shaking his wrists out. He tapped the insides of his arms with his claws, as though hoping it would wake up his silk glands. Father, Blue said, why do you all fight with each other? Aren't there more important enemies? Like who? Admiral asked. The Queen? The Hivewings? The guards who imprison you here? Blue said, lowering his voice. Oh, tosh, said Admiral. The Queen is our employer. The guards keep us fed and safe and on schedule. He shook his head. How could his father not understand that this was a prison? Maybe after you've been in here for a while, you have to convince yourself you chose this, so it all feels less awful. He'd met 2 dragons among the flame silks, who he suggested weren't as resigned or falsely content as Admiral. Heliconian was restless and fidgety and glanced at the exits a lot. She also asked the only questions about the outside world and what was happening beyond the cavern. And Pyrid seemed desperately unhappy, although he couldn't say anything bad about the Hivewings. Also, Frittleri, with his everlasting bad temper, surely he wanted to escape. I just think it's silly to be so mad at each other, Blue said, when there are far worse things going on, and dragons who are treating you far more terribly than Danaid. If you could all stop fighting and stand together, maybe we could actually change things. No, no, Admiral said firmly. I would never work with Danaid or Clubtail or Whitespeck. They are selfish ignoramuses and wrong about everything. I can get things done through the Queen. Blue sighed. He could see these dragons had baked their opinions of one another in a furnace, and were determined to stick to their factions. He slept poorly again that night, troubled by dreams of searching for Cricket through the dark halls of her school. No matter how many corners he turned or how many doors he opened, he never found the library. But he ran into Danaid and Fiddleary and Period over and over again, all of them yelling over his head at someone else across the room. Then, just before he woke up, he found a room with Luna's cocoon in it, but the threads were cut open, and no one was inside. He scrambled out of his nest before he was fully awake, stumbling over his claws as he hurried to her cocoon. It was still there, still safe, still warm. The silk walls seemed thinner than before, so he thought he could see the shadow of Luna on the other side. He leaned against it and whispered, "Luna, I miss you." The silk moved against his scales, a slight push and give, as though the dragon inside was rolling over or nudging him back. "She's coming out tonight," Blue said, grinning, when Admiral came over to check on him. Even in this peculiar place, he couldn't help feeling excited for Luna. She'd finally have wings, like she always wanted. But would she ever get to really use them? His smile dimmed as the cocoon rocked again. Even though this was the last place he wanted to be, he was glad he'd be here for Luna when she came out. He was glad he'd be the one to explain everything, instead of a bunch of squabbling strangers. "Dad," Blue said, "what do you think will happen to me if I end up not being a flame silk?" "You'll get one of the regular silkwing jobs down here," his father said breezily. "Moving cauldrons, or chopping food, or cleaning, that sort of thing." "But what if I want to go home?" Blue asked, wishing he could stop his voice from trembling. "Would I really have to stay here?" Admiral drummed his claws on the rocks below him. "Well," he said, "the Queen doesn't exactly like to have silkwings wandering around who know where this cavern is." Blue's shoulders slumped, and Admiral hurried on quickly. "But I'll tell you what, I'll write her a letter, or lots of letters. If you're not a flame silk, I'll think of some very good reasons why you should get to go home. I'll convince her, don't worry. It might take a while, but then maybe you'll decide you want to stay. It's quite nice here, and this is where I am." He finished with a wistful note in his voice. "I know," Blue said. "I'll think about it," he added, to make his dad feel better. That day passed much like the one before. Blue prowled all the corners again, looking for loose stones or a breath of air from outside. He tried to avoid getting dragged into the fights between the flame silks, but it was almost impossible. Every time he walked across the cave, someone would call him over, and then someone else would start shouting about how he shouldn't associate with worm-eating lowlifes like that, and soon they'd all be arguing over an offensive remark one of them had made 10 years ago, and finally Admiral would have to come hustle Blue away to safety. But he did find a spot, just one, that gave him a spark of hope. It was in the wall under the ledge where the high wings guarded the staircase. Here the rock slanted back a ways into a craggy corner, and when Blue ran his talons over the stone, he found a hole. It wasn't a very big hole. It was just large enough for him to fit one of his arms through it. But when he did, he felt open space on the other side. Open space and a touch of chilliness, as though there was another big cave back there, or maybe even a passage. The rocks he could feel on the back of the wall seemed damp. He tried peering through, but he couldn't see anything but darkness. He returned to his nest, trying to think like Cricket. How would she get through the wall if she were stuck in here? It was early evening when Luna's cocoon started squirming. He crouched beside it, touching the silk gently with his talons whenever it seemed as if it might rock too far away. Their father was there too, watching with shining eyes. A crack appeared at one end of the golden cocoon. Blue held his breath as it widened, slicing off the tip. Claws appeared in the gap, pushing away the top of the cocoon, and then he could see Luna's head, shoving her way out as well. Luna, he called. I'm here. You're doing great. You're almost done. She couldn't answer yet, but he saw her antennae unfurl and wave at him. Luna wriggled and heaved and slowly dragged her whole body out until finally she left the empty husk of the cocoon behind her. Whoosh, she said, collapsing on her stomach on the warm rocks. Her wings unfolded gracefully from her back and spread out to dry, like cascading petals of green sunlight. They were beautiful. You did it! Blue cheered. He lay down beside her and nudged her snout with his. Your wings are amazing! So amazing, Luna! His throat closed over everything else he wanted to say. She smiled sleepily at him. Then why are you crying, little brother? She asked, overwhelmed by my gloriousness? I'm just going to keep reading till the end because we're really close to the end. Pretty much, he said with a sniffly laugh. I missed you so much. Aw, she said, covering one of his talons with hers. It was only 5 days, silly. Yeah, but they were really stressful days, he said. She blinked at him for a long moment, and then her gaze slowly shifted to the cave walls behind him, and the glow of the light from all the flame silk cauldrons, and the stranger watching them eagerly from extremely close by. She rolled her wrists in and stared at them, then sat up abruptly. Hi, said Admiral. Oh, wow, I can't believe this is happening. I'm so happy to meet you. Luna stared at him, then at Blue with an explain this face. This is Admiral, Blue said. Our dad. He felt a twinge of pain in his own wrists and glanced down. Uh-oh. Were those pinpricks of gold lava under his scales? This is the greatest day of my life, Admiral declared with the most enormous grin on his face. Enough smiling. Time to spin, Sandfly said, stomping up and poking him in the shoulder. I give them 3 days until they figure out that you're the most annoying dragon in here, Fritillary shouted from across the cavern. Luna glanced around frantically, her wings fluttering. She leaned forward and seized Blue's talons between hers. Blue? Where are we? Thank you for the hydrate. So Swordtail might be nearby, Blue said, or might have been captured. This is somehow too much information and absolutely not enough information at the same time, Luna said, rubbing her forehead. Tangerine? Admiral offered. Thanks, she said, taking it and peeling it quickly. She'd been eating non-stop while Blue told her the whole story. Admiral, it turned out, had a stash of food tucked away in his nest, and was surprisingly adept at tossing fruit while spinning flame silk at the same time. But the queen hasn't come down to yell at you or anything? Luna asked. No. I really thought she would, or that I'd get dragged into her throne room and punished, but this seems to be it. She just had me thrown in here. Like a lost thing that she found and put back in its place, Luna said grumpily. I mean, I'm glad you weren't punished, Blue, but the queen uses punishment mostly to send a message to the rest of her subjects, so I'm guessing... So I'm guessing she didn't want to draw attention to the fact that she has flame silks, or that little wingless silkwing was able to hide for her for so long. That was only because I met Cricket, Blue said. She's the one who figured out how to hide me. Luna rolled her eyes at him affectionately. Trust you to find the one good hivewing in the entire tribe. Now I'll never be able to convince you that they're all evil. Because they're not, he protested. There must be others as nice as Cricket. Maybe not as smart or as pretty or as funny or kind, but probably a few that are nice. Luna shook her head. I doubt it, but even if they are, they never get a chance to be because the Queen's brainwashing. She shuddered from antennae to tail. That mind control thing sounds so creepy. It is, Blue said. I hope Eo's all right. Me too. I hope she found the chrysalis. Luna, did you know about the chrysalis? A little bit. Luna stood up, shaking out her wings and testing different positions she could hold them in. I knew Swordtail and Eo had just met them. I was hoping to join once I had my wings. I didn't quite figure on waking up in here. Blue winced, and she gave him a sharp look. Is your silk coming in? Does it feel hot? She took his talons and turned them over to study his wrists. It was hard to see if they were glowing with all the light from the other flame silk in the cave. I'm supposed to spin my cocoon tomorrow night, Blue said. I wish I didn't have to do it in here. He'd been nervous enough about his metamorphosis when he knew it would happen in the tranquil, peaceful safety of the cocoon, but it was much more unnerving to imagine spinning his silk here, in this too bright place with its shouting dragons and stomping guards all staring at him. There must be a way out, Luna said. She looked up at the guards by the stairwell. How many guards do you think there are? Luna, Blue said, there's no way we can fight them. Just you and me? That's crazy. Sorry, got distracted. But now I can do this, she said. She held out one arm and a flaming silk thread burst from her wrist. It hit one of Admiral's piles of letters and instantly set it ablaze. Ack! Admiral cried. He leapt over and knocked the burning pile away from the others, then stamped it out with his talons. Then it was a pile of ashes on the rocks. When it was a pile of ashes on the rocks, he picked up the fiery strand of silk and brandished it at Luna. This is not a toy. Look at what you did. Now how will I remember what I've already written? The Queen doesn't like repetition. This is terrible. You need to learn how to be careful with your flame silk, young lady. Sorry, Luna said innocently. Blue blinked at Admiral. Dad, you're holding the flame silk in your talons. Why isn't it burning you? Admiral climbed back into his nest and dropped Luna's flame silk into his own cauldron. It glowed a much brighter orange gold than what was already in there. Flame silk dragons can't be burned by flame silk, he said. That would be absurd. Wow. Wait, so if some already burned me? No, it will still burn you until you've gone through metamorphosis, whether you're going to be a flame silk or not, Admiral said. Luna, come here and let me show you the different kinds you can make. Flame silk is a big responsibility. Luna rolled her eyes at Blue, but she went over to their father and gave him her full attention. Blue sighed, rubbing his wrists. His wing buds were tingling, too, in a way that was both exciting and uncomfortable. He wished he could run through the savannah, under the stars, just breathing air that wasn't thick and hot and overly stuffed with oranges. He scrambled down to the central floor of the cavern and made his way to the spot under the staircase ledge where he'd found the hole earlier that day. He guessed it was close to the middle of the night. Only 2 guards were on the stairs, and the regular Silkwing workers were gone to a cramped apartment home in one of the warehouses, according to Admiral. Most of the flame silks were asleep. Danaid, Admiral, and Fritillary were the only ones awake, pouring silk into their cauldrons. Blue could feel Danaid's eyes on him as he poked through the rocks. He was out of sight of the staircase guards here, but the ones above the glass could still see him. He glanced up to confirm this, and the glow of at least 6 pairs of eyes stared back. So even if he could chisel through the wall, he'd never get a chance to. There was no way to do anything surreptitious in here. He found the hole again and slipped his claws through. Reaching for that feeling of freedom, the dark open space on the other side that might lead anywhere, to the outside world, to the sky and all its stars. On the other side of the wall, unseen, something slipped gently between his claws and squeezed. Blue came this close to screaming his head off, but at the same moment he heard someone whisper, "Shh." He bit hard on his tongue and froze. "Blue," the voice whispered. He tilted his head closer to the wall. "Cricket?" "Shh. Yes, it's me." "And me?" Someone else whispered fiercely. Is Luna all right? Whispered a third voice. Swordtail. She's amazing, Blue said softly. I can't believe you're all... Blue, don't talk. Crickets interrupted. They're watching you very closely. It's suspicious enough that you're over here with your arm in a hole. If you keep talking to the wall, someone's going to investigate. She squeezed his claws again and let go. Reluctantly, he pulled his talon back, although it felt emptier than ever now, as though it had found its missing half, and now it had to be alone again. He wanted to reach for her once more, to be sure she was real and really there and really alive. But he could see how that might look a bit strange. Danaid was pretending to look at her wrists, but she was leaning so far toward him that she was in danger of toppling out of her nest. The eyes up above stared and stared. He wasn't sure they ever blinked. Was that a Hive-Wing power some guards had? No need for eyelids? He sat down and started building a small pyramid of pebbles, trying to look harmless. That was something he was pretty good at. The Leafwings were trying to build a tunnel, Cricket said softly. They get into the hive from below. That's how they found this place, by accident, as they were digging underneath. Did you find your father? Sorry, I know you can't answer. But Luna came out of her cocoon? Are there a lot of flame silks down here? Oh, you can't answer that either. I can't believe how big this cave is. Not big enough, if you're trapped in it for your entire life, Blue thought. He thought he would be more horrified by the idea of leafwings tunneling into the hives. 6 days ago, the image of leafwings suddenly bursting out of the ground inside his city would have been the most terrifying thing he could possibly imagine. But he'd met a few other more terrifying things since then. Listen, Sundew hissed. Cricket wants you to get out of there. I do too, Swordtail chimed in. Right, but I don't care what he thinks, Sundew clarified. Cricket nearly died with me, though, so I kind of feel like I owe you guys one. My parents have more important things to do, but I might be able to come up with a plan. Can you be ready tomorrow night? Blue's heart sank. He shook his head and shifted himself around the rock pyramid, pretending to reach for another stone, but really angling so whoever was peering through this hole could see his wing buds. He heard Cricket let out a soft gasp. He's about to go into metamorphosis, she whispered to Sundew. We have to get him out now. Tonight. Oh, rotten bark beetles, Sundew grumbled. Fine. I'll do it the messy way. Blue, can you see a rock in the crack in the wall near the bottom that arches around in a half circle? Blue glanced casually at the wall. He spotted what she meant immediately. It looked like a sun setting. Can you and Luna fit through there, if I can knock out the chunk of rock beneath the crack? He thought so, although he hadn't spent enough time with Luna's wings yet to be sure about how big they were. He was a little more worried about how to fit Admiral through, but his father was quite skinny. He'd just have to squish. Blue gave a very slight nod, scattering his pebbles as though he'd gotten frustrated with his construction. Great, go get her, and everyone be ready to run. Good luck, Blue, Cricket whispered. Tell Luna I'm here, Swordtail interjected, very heroically. You sat around in a greenhouse and then followed me into a tunnel, Sundew observed. I'm not sure you qualify for a statue in your honor just yet. Shh, Cricket scolded both of them. Blue picked up a pebble and pretended to peer at it closely, then set it down and headed back over to Luna. Everything all right? Danaid asked as he went by. She leaned her elbows on the edge of her nest, watching him with wide-eyed interest. Oh, yes, Blue said. Just some pretty rocks I think my sister would like. You will introduce her to me, won't you? Danaid said, and her voice was an odd mixture of pushy and wistful. No matter what your dad says? Of course, Blue said, feeling guilty. He couldn't stay here just to keep these lonely Flamesilks company, but he was sorry that escaping with Luna meant abandoning them to their endless quarrels. Is there any way to bring them along? Could they come with us? He didn't know how to alert the other Flamesilks without attracting the attention of the guards, and given that he knew about them so far, he was afraid that even the idea of an escape plan would somehow trigger a screaming match that would give everything away. He hurried back to Luna, worrying over the problem in his head. Rescuing her was everything. It was the whole reason he'd broken so many rules and gotten in so much trouble. It was the most important thing, getting her out of here. but he wished there was a way to rescue all of them. Luna sat up as he approached, and her eyes gleamed when she saw the expression on his face. She'd always been able to read him, ever since they first hatched. "You found a way out," she whispered excitedly. "Our friends are here," he whispered back. "Then let's go." She jumped to her feet and looked up at Admiral. He said, blinking down at them. "I was just composing another letter in my head. To thank the Queen for bringing you here, of course. My letters can't all be complaints, you know? Oh, no, that wouldn't do. I must show my gratitude when she is so generous with us. My thank you letter in regards to the tangerines was a work of art." He shot a regretful look at the pile of ashes, as though wondering how many more masterpieces had been lost to Luna's flame silk. "Father," Blue said softly, "we have a way out of here, but we have to go right now." "Go?" Admiral echoed. "What do you mean?" "We're going to escape," Luna said. "All three of us. Come on, quick, while the guards are looking sleepy." "But I'm in the middle of my spinning rotation," Admiral said, "and I haven't made nearly enough of the quota. You're just going to have to make it up with all your bright, lovely silk. We'll probably give you a turn in the morning, once you've rested a bit." "No," Luna said firmly. "I'm not giving anyone my bright, lovely silk. It's mine, and I'm escaping with Blue right now." Admiral twitched, as though the word escape was finally crawling into his ears. No, he said. "The hives need our silk. We're providing a great service. We're very important. You're very important. You can't leave. What are you even talking about? We're not allowed to leave. That rule is very clear." "Come with us, please," Blue begged. "This is no way to live, Father. We could be together and free out there." "Out where?" Admiral scoffed. "There's nowhere the Queen doesn't control. No, we mustn't anger her with ungrateful stunts like escape attempts. Oh dear, you'll get us all in trouble. It'll make everything worse." "How could it be worse than this?" Luna asked. "In the beginning, there were chains," Admiral said, "on our ankles. I was the one who got rid of those. It only took me about 4 years and 200 or so letters, but I finally convinced her we could be trusted without them. And now you want to break that trust." "This is not a mutual relationship," Luna said. "The Queen is using you. She's giving you next to nothing, and you're letting her walk all over you instead of fighting back. We're not going to be a part of that." She turned to Blue. "I don't think this is going to work. We have to go without him." "Oh, no," Admiral cried. "You can't. You'll undo all the progress I've made with the Queen. We have rules for a reason, you know, and she'll be so disappointed." "So escape with us." Blue couldn't give up. He couldn't just leave his father here. "Father, you don't have to follow rules that are unjust, and you don't have to do everything the Queen says. Don't you feel like there are rules in your heart that are more important? About helping other dragons and standing up for anyone who's treated badly and loving whoever you want and choosing to live your life in your own kind, peaceful way?" He glanced over and saw Luna staring at him in surprise. She reached out with one wing and pulled him into a hug. "Wow," she said. "It really was a long 5 days, wasn't it?" "Well, I just understood it, finally," he said. "That there are dragons who aren't safe, and dragons I could help, and being a good little Silkwing who follows the rules was making my life easy, but also helping to keep a bad system in place. I didn't know before how bad it was for so many dragons. Like you, Father. Like all the flame silks in here. This isn't right." "And you shouldn't want it for your children," Luna said. "If you want to stay, that's fine, but we're going." She turned Blue towards the center of the cave. "No," Admiral said. No, it's wrong. I can't let you do this. Guards!" Blue inhaled sharply. The hive wing by the staircase whipped their heads towards them. His father was sabotaging their escape, turning them in to keep them trapped here. They had to run, but their escape route looked a whole continent away, and it wasn't even open yet. "Guards!" Admiral bellowed. "Listen! Stop annoying the guards!" Danae shouted at Admiral, interrupting him. "They don't want to hear your thoughts on potassium at this hour, or ever." It's not that, Admiral yelled back, although my thoughts on potassium are very well researched and relevant. But hey, guards, my dragonettes! Your brains are a pile of bananas, Larry hollered from his perch, never one to miss out on a fight. Your dragonettes are boring. They are not, Danaid and Admiral roared in unison. I think they're charming, Danaid yelled. You don't even know them, Admiral shouted. They're my dragonettes, and they're fascinating, but then they're the opposite of you, Danaid bellowed. What is happening? Luna said to Blue, covering her ears. There was something about the sparkle in Danaid's eyes. Blue wasn't sure if it was her usual spirited fury, or if maybe... I think Danaid might be trying to help us, he said quietly. He glanced up at the guards. They were sitting down again, rolling their eyes at one another as though they'd heard fights like this a million times. Follow me. Walk. Don't run. Act casual. He climbed down through the stalagmites, trying to quiet his thudding heart. Guards! Admiral yelled again, but as Blue had hoped, Admiral didn't jump up and chase them. He would have to stop his silk spinning to do so, and that was yet another rule he'd never break. Shut up! Pirid whined, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. Why are you making so much noise? It's the middle of the night. Yeah, some of us were sleeping, White Speck shouted. You're not helping matters with your bellowing, Heliconian chimed in from the nest closest to them. Now all of them were awake and shouting. It was perfect cover. The high-wing guards looked like the last thing they wanted to do was come down and get involved in this, and no matter how much Admiral roared, they couldn't hear his accusations over the noise of everyone else. Blue paused at Danaid's nest. Thank you, he said, holding one talon up to her. She took it and squeezed it with a wink. Whatever I'm doing, it's great fun. This is Luna, he said. Luna, this is Danaid, who is definitely a dragon worth knowing. Danaid beamed over the edge of her nest at Luna. Nice to meet you, she said. Now scoot. I can see something exciting is about to happen. She nodded over at the wall, and Blue realized that the crack looked wider than before, and something seemed to be coming through it. You could come with us, he said. I'm not sure my old heart could stand running for my life, she said. But if you find a more sedate way to get us out of here, come back for me. He nodded. I will try. I promise. She went back to shouting at the other flame silks as he and Luna moved away. It was funny to think of Danaid wanting anything sedate when she seemed so delighted in the middle of chaos. The stone gave a low crack as they crouched beside it, and Blue realized that it was being pushed out of the wall by... Were those roots? He gingerly touched one of the thick brown fingers that were shoving their way through the crack. It felt like branches, woody and knobbly under his claws. Sundew was growing something, somehow, faster than anything should be able to grow, and it was shoving the rocks apart, breaking through the crack, creating an opening. He dug his talons in around the boulder and yanked. Luna did the same, and with a lot of grunting and muscle pulling, they felt it slowly give way until it tumbled out at their feet. The hole in the wall yawned at them, and on the other side, beyond the roots, he saw 3 faces crowding in to peer through. Swordtail reached toward Luna. You're safe, he whispered. And I have wings, she whispered giddily. She shoved Blue in front of her. Go on, quick! Suddenly, there was a furious pounding overhead. Smash, smash, smash against the glass. They had been spotted. That meant the guards were coming. All the guards. Blue dove into the hole and wriggled through into the dark, navigating a small thicket of leafy branches. He felt the warmth of Cricket's talons lifting him up and saw light glinting off her glasses. I'm so glad you're alive, he said breathlessly. I had a feeling you'd rescue me, except I thought maybe I had to come rescue you, but I didn't know how. You did rescue me, just by being you, she said. Oh gosh, that wasn't corny at all. Luna popped through and Swordtail swept his wings around her. My love, he cried. By the forest, all of you stop being sickening and run, Sundew cried. She took off in a whirl of green scales, disappearing rapidly into the dark. Luna produced a small wisp of flame that lit up the tunnel just enough for them to see, and they ran. But before she did, for that moment in the dark, Blue had glanced down at his wrists and saw tiny globes of fire under his scales. Ah, so close, so close. Actually, not that close, but I feel like I need to finish because this won't take up another hour. I mean, another 2 hours. Got like a smallest chunk. Actually, I think part of it's like epilogue that isn't actually part of the book, so we're probably fine. We can just chat if it doesn't. True, true. But we're so close, and it's like getting to the drama. Save your voice. Okay. I can just start the next book if I finish this one mid. So I can just start the next book next time if we finish it halfway through. So I will take a break. I thought I was closer to the end. We've got like a sliver, like very little much left, but all right. Excuse me. Guess we should find somebody to raid, huh? Oh, I feel like I did a better job on that one. Like, I had some stumbles, but I'm pretty proud of that. And if anybody's still lurking and hanging out, if you would like, you can grab the raid messages. No pressure, but it would really help out, of course. And let me find somebody who is live. It's getting much better. Thank you. I'm trying my best. And my voice doesn't feel as rough, so clearly it's getting used to the thing, and I don't need to like clear my throat, I feel like, as much. Ooh, there's so many people doing art right now. There's someone drawing grubs from Hollow Knight. So on that. Oh, and they're a cute like dog or cat. Cat. They're a cute cat VTuber with a cute cat model. They're drawing grubs from Hollow Knight. And they've only been going for 8 minutes. So I think this will work out. Ba, 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 ba. There we go. Alrighty. I will see you all tomorrow for more Night in the Woods. I'm not entirely sure how long the game is. It could be the end of Night in the Woods tomorrow. I'm not sure. But I'll see you tomorrow. And thank you all for watching. I had a massive fun time reading for you all. And I will, yeah, see you all tomorrow. Already said that, but bye.